The Sandy and Toddcast is a Mindgarden Media podcast in association with
Screw You, Todd
Productions.
Broadcasting from two very different yet magical places not found on any map. Get ready to discuss the strange, weird, ghostly, crazy, spooky, and odd things that take place around us each and every day. All while having a little bit of fun. This is the Sandy and Toddcast.
Sandy and Toddcast back for another episode of season 13. This is episode number 2, and we're going to talk about freaky stuff, weird stuff, ghosty stuff, all sorts of stuff.
All sorts of stuff. Are you going to do this She is Sandy?
Oh, She is Sandy.
He is Todd.
And I guess that's the way we start every week. I forgot.
How about we're doing 2 episodes in a row? We're getting back to our normal routine again.
I mean, don't count on it every week, folks. But you know,
I know. Yeah, some cool stuff this week. So I have to remember last week when we talked about the movie on Netflix called The Deliverance with Glenn Close.
Yes.
And what were your thoughts on that movie?
Well, obviously, the movie is over the top in many instances.
Yeah.
But after doing some research after watching the movie about the actual incident, there were some things that seemed to be very true to life in the movie. And one of them is a scene, spoiler alert, when one of the young boys from the family had been taken to the hospital because they thought he was kind of mentally ill. And they had him tied down on a bed, and he broke free from that and then kind of spider walked backwards up a wall and onto the ceiling and then back down.
Right. And
that was actually in the police report from the actual incident. So my thoughts on it were, it was a little over the top, but again, my thoughts always go to, how often are there people who we just automatically think there's mental illness when that may be being brought on by other things? What were your thoughts on the movie? So
I totally agree with you. Of course, right in the beginning of the movie, they talk about it's based on a true story.
Yeah.
So we're going to add the word loosely.
Yep. For
the most part, loosely. And of course, it's a movie, and it's especially a movie from a little bit more modern times, you know, about 13 years after the true story happened. So there's a little more embellishment. I thought it was a decent movie. But like you said, it was a little more over the top. If you like a lot of like the drama, I thought it was very well done in that it was very real. Like the way that she talked, the way that the characters talked in the movie were very, very, they were in Pittsburgh, I think, in this movie.
Right.
Very in the poorer section.
Right.
African-American.
Struggling.
Struggling, all of that. I thought that was so real. Like, that was great. Instead of powder puffing a movie and making it seem like it's not that way, they really did a great job in setting the tone for the movie. As I watched the movie, I was trying to mentally figure out what the real story was. And of course, a lot of this stuff happens and we never hear about it. So it would have been pretty difficult to do that. I figured, I'll just Google it after the fact. And then I saw the part about the child spider walking up the wall. And I said, why does this sound familiar to me? So the movie ends. And at the end of the movie, it says that the story was based on LaToya Ammons.
Yes.
I said, I know that name. How do I know that name? Well, I Googled it. LaToya. Okay. So do you remember about 7 or 8 years ago when, I hate saying it, but the Ghost Adventures, Zach Baggins, they did that mockumentary. I refuse to call it a documentary because it was a mockumentary of the Demon House in Gary, Indiana.
Okay. It
was this small white house I think it was in a lower income neighborhood, and the mother had issues. I don't know if it was truly, I don't know what the whole situation was. Nobody can know for sure she lived it.
Right.
But it looked to be demonic. And again, demonic activity is incredibly rare, but it does happen. And he did the documentary on her family. That part was true. The fact that Zach Bagans
got
added
involved.
his own spin and got involved, that's the mockumentary side of it. But he ended up, it was in the news not long later that he actually purchased that house. And
you had asked me about that last week, and I told you no, because I didn't know that part of it.
Yes, but it was. And so what happened was he bought the house, and a lot of these investigators and very serious paranormal people were very excited about it because they wanted to be able to use it as a learning tool for research and, serious people, not like what the Conjuring House has turned into over the years, but really serious people who wanted to see if they could do research in there. Well, he bulldozed it. He bought the house and then he bulldozed it. Now, that was like a huge thing in the paranormal community when it happened all those years ago. It's like 2016, 2017.
So why did he bulldoze it?
Because he said it wasn't safe for anyone and all of that kind of stuff.
So, well, here's the thing. And I don't like Zach Bagans.
Yes.
I really dislike
Yes.
him. So the fact that he bought it kind of bothered me.
Yep.
And the thought of using a location as a way to learn.
Uh-huh.
I think it's okay, but it also concerns me because if this place was nasty, maybe not the safest place to be doing investigations.
Right.
And again, and we've had this discussion too before, like how many times does a haunted location, how many times do the energies and spirits there want to be asked, what's your name? Do something for us, right?
Right.
So, like, I'm kind of against that, but knowing Zach, and I don't know him well, but I just know you understand his mentality. He could have made a lot of money off that location.
Mm-hmm.
So my question is, did he maybe do the right thing?
I don't know. I will say after now, what I understand of LaToya's situation, it was really, really bad. It was really bad. They are very fortunate that they made it out of there.
It sounds like she had her own personal demons prior to moving there, which again probably exasperated the problem.
Yes.
And made her more susceptible to shit going on.
From my understanding, a lot of times when demonic activity is involved in a situation, it's because the person is somehow morally, intellectually, emotionally at risk for some reason, debilitated for some reason. And so it totally makes sense to me. I mean, I do believe that this stuff really happens.
Yep.
I don't believe that it happens in every case. And I try to explain that to people. When I go into any type of investigation, we were just talking before we started recording about a couple. We went to their house Friday night, and it was kind of a low key, just sort of walk through, do a little investigating. They've had some activity turn into a little something else, but not in a bad way, just a whole other direction than we were planning on going. But I try to tell people that the chances of something even being negative is fairly low.
Yeah.
Dave and I, on the way home on Friday night, we were in the car, and I kind of chuckled because we were discussing everything, and I kind of chuckled, and I said, I've got Scooby flying off my gun cabinet like every other day, and it doesn't even faze me because there's nothing negative about it. There's nothing that concerns me about it. It's sort of like a calling card at this point. I feel like when the spirits come and they have their safe space and they come for some reason, they're leaving me that calling card. That's the chosen way to let me know that they were here. I came in the other day and he's 3 feet from the gun cabinet. There's no way that even if this Scooby-Doo fell over because of something, that it was going to get launched off the cabinet. Even if it fell and bounced. Dave and I stood here and bounced it 50 times and it never went where it ended up being. But I really feel for people in situations like this because I really want them to understand that this is a rare occurrence. This is rare. If you have activity in your home, you have activity everywhere around you. You just may not know that.
Yeah.
There is energy everywhere. You may just not know that. Your loved ones are probably with you on and off on many occasions, and you just don't realize it unless they make themselves known to you. They're watching over you. There's nothing negative about most of this stuff. And if there is, then you can reach out to people who are willing to help you. But I think that the LaToya Ammons case was just so incredibly strong. And good point on the Zach Baggins thing. Maybe for one time in his life, the man did the right thing.
Right.
And, did what he should have done. And maybe there are some of these other places that are always being talked about in the paranormal community that maybe should be the same way. We did the investigation at Trudeau Sanatorium last year. As a matter of fact, next weekend, we won't be on the air because I will be up in Saranac Lake with Dave, and I'm going to be participating in our presentation to the community about our results from our investigation of Trudeau. And there is one building on the property that I truly believe needs to be torn down. They've over the years, they've sort of turned some of the buildings into other things. They're gorgeous. They're historic. They can be rehabilitated and revitalized and made into things. But this is one building that shouldn't be. I think this building should be torn down. So there are some buildings like that.
I also wanted to talk a little bit about people who are in bad situations in life. So let's say you are an evil energy, right?
Right.
And you get off on torturing and creating havoc in life. Who better to choose to attack than someone who already has their own demons? And people will automatically question whether or not there could possibly really be anything going on. Well, this person's just messed up.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Look at the history of this person. Drug and alcohol abuse, bad family situations, all sorts of stuff this person has been through. How easy would it be? Because if you take a person who's quote unquote normal, right? Mm-hmm. Doesn't have a lot of demons, everybody has some, but doesn't have a ton, is well liked, loved, loving family, upstanding citizen. If you go after that person, you lose the ability to torture that person even more. Meaning, if you're evil and you want to torture somebody, right, and you get off on that, not only is the torture bad and the experience bad, but nobody believes you because you have a history, because you have a past, which is even more torture, right?
Right.
They're not going to get help. If it's an upstanding citizen in the community, maybe the church, maybe somebody comes to the rescue. Well, this could never happen to this person because blah, 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 right? They've never lied in their life. They blah, blah, blah. I mean, that gets pretty freaking deep.
Yeah, it's true. A lot of vulnerability involved.
Exactly.
A lot of vulnerability. And sometimes how often do you hear of the exorbitantly wealthy or prominent people? And I'm not saying it couldn't happen, but How many times do you hear about that? It's usually the people who are a little more downtrodden or who live quote unquote normal lives that tend to have this stuff happen to them. It's just, it's horrible. It's unfortunately not a common thing. Now, that's not to say that there aren't some spirits who are real assholes, because I've experienced a couple of them, and they're jerks, and they're nasty. But it's a big difference between a jerk and something like the demonic. And I truly believe that LaToya and her family did deal with the demonic in this case. So just a really interesting movie. I kind of almost wish I had known going into it of the parallel, who it was based on. And as soon as I saw the child going up the wall, I'm like, wait, this sounds really familiar to me, because you know me, I follow all of that stuff.
Right.
And I was like, wait a minute. And then when I saw the name, I said, oh boy. Now that was in Gary, Indiana. This takes place in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. But just a really, it was an interesting movie. It wasn't the best movie I've ever seen.
No, not at all. Not at all. But again, I think the fact that you knew that part of it was real, that was the interesting part to me.
Me too.
And I will also tell you that, and you know my house, right? So
yes.
The back stairs off my kitchen goes down 3 or 4 steps. There's a side door out to the driveway. Typical Wisconsin house, that same steps. Then if you take a left, instead of going out into the driveway, you go into the basement.
Right.
So that night after the movie, I had left the side door open. The screen door was open, right? And because it was nice out, it was kind of cool that night, so the doors were open, and so then I had to go close the door. I haven't felt this way in a while, but I was freaked out a little bit because I had to walk over there. I didn't turn on any lights going over, but then I had to kind of like turn on the lights to the hallway down to the door, and then the basement's right there. What if I look out the door and there's a face? You know, the whole thing.
I know. It's funny. I live in a neighborhood like yours.
Yeah.
So you're not very far at all from like the big main roads.
Right.
You know, but your neighborhood is quiet.
Yeah.
You know, we're down your street probably 15 times, you know, over the past few years. And it's a normal, quiet neighborhood.
Right.
And ours is the same way. We're down at the bottom of a street. You know, it's just a quiet. But even after I watch stuff like that, even after we watch like the documentaries or the Expedition X or anything, if the side door is open, I'm just sort of like quietly closing it or, you know, stuff like that, because it just kind of freaks you out a little bit. It doesn't matter whether it's over the top or not. It still kind of freaks you out a little bit.
I think it just makes you realize that it really could happen anywhere. To anyone.
Yes.
You know?
It sure can. It sure can. When I first started having activity, and I've only really had, that I'm aware of, activity like this, like what I get a couple of years ago. And it was right at the time when Trey died. And it just started up. Do I believe it was Trey? I think it was in the beginning, because it wasn't just Scooby. It was other things happening too. And I still think he visits.
Yeah.
Although I do think that his visits have become less frequent. And a lot of it is because of the ability I've had to get that closure now.
Right.
It's almost like he stayed with me more just to make sure I was okay.
Yeah.
And I will tell you that getting that closure made such a world of difference for me. It's no longer crying every time I try to talk to, you know, I talk to him into the air, and now it's just a calmer feeling. But I do think that the crystals add to it. I think it's an attraction. I do think the safety issue is there, but it doesn't freak me out. But I am so much more aware of it now. And I think we're just aware of the possibility that something could happen.
Yeah.
Something could be there. I never feel negative. I always set once every few days, I'll do my usual, you know, no negativity allowed in this space, in this home, on this land. I've got all my doors and windows in here. Or, you know, I do think it's a safe space, but could something negative come through? Of course it could. So you always just have to be prepared for that. If you do believe in the possibility of this stuff, then you should always be prepared for what could happen.
And people will say, well, if you watch something like that, you're inviting something into your house, into your life. I don't believe that's the case, but I will go back and say something that I've said before, which is I do believe that it makes you more aware of stuff. So maybe you didn't notice the Scooby thing, or you didn't notice whatever, and all of a sudden something happens. You're like, what was that?
Kind of odd,
Right.
It also invites more junk food because I tend to eat more junk food during these movies. I don't know if it's like self-soothing if I get nervous about them. I had some popcorn.
That's not junk food.
Well, Friday night, this was hilarious. Friday night, we get to the people's house and they had a full spread for us.
Oh, that's sweet.
And it was so nice. And then we had gone to the bakery and got a dozen of these humongous donuts to bring with us. And I ate an entire Boston cream donut, like huge entire Boston.
Oh my God. Look at me. I ate a whole donut.
Well, but I don't know.
My life is I ate a whole sleeve of Oreos. There's a difference between the two. They're the Halloween ones. So they've got the orange cream filling.
I love those. I just love those.
I have, there's a couple of things that I'm hoping to be involved with. It's all a timing thing for me, but there is an investigation that I'm being asked to do for a theater company, Evergreen Theater in Green Bay. They're doing House on Haunted Hill. And so they're hoping that I could come in and do a quick investigation there at the theater to see if there is anything prior to them doing the show. And then we can kind of talk about it, which could be very, very cool. The other thing is there is a location in Green Bay called Heritage Hill. And it's kind of like a living museum in a way, but it's all these buildings that were brought together from original buildings in Green Bay when it was known as Fort Howard. And it's the old blacksmith shop, and it's the old church, and it's the old homestead, and all
like
that kind of stuff.
Dream locations.
Yeah. And so they're doing some investigations in October that I've been invited to be involved with.
Why can't we just live even a little bit closer to
I
each
know.
other?
I was thinking it would be so cool for you to come and we could do that theater thing together. And
I know.
Yeah.
It would just even a couple states, although we are planning, fingers crossed, Gettysburg for next June.
I think that's going to happen.
I think it is. I want it to because I'm excited. You and me in Gettysburg. I told you, I love Gettysburg. Every time I go there, I have these most profound, insane experiences. Last August, I heard the Rebel yell on Little Big Top.
Yep.
I mean, what the hell? And so, amongst all the other stuff that we experienced. So I really want to be there with you. So I'm excited about that. Let's keep our fingers crossed. We can do a whole bunch of lives from...
We could do a whole season's worth of podcasts just from there. Just pre-record them all, and then we don't.
Days.
Yeah,
I know it'll be great. Oh, I'm excited. So all right. So before we wrap up, we have a few questions we wanted to talk about. One of our dear friends, Deej from Diggin With Deej, she and I were on the phone a couple weeks ago for like an hour and a half because we were just going back and forth and catching up. We met for the first time in Gettysburg last August. In 2023. And we did some investigating together at Sachs Bridge. There is a video in our group. Is it in our group or on our page? I can't remember which one. Probably both. Of us doing a K2 session at Sachs Bridge and making some contact with who we believe to be a soldier. One of the soldiers that was actually hung on the bridge. And so that was really neat. So, and we went to Devil's Den and we went to dinner. We had so much fun. So she had a couple questions that she asked me about. Now, Deej does metal detecting, and she has they call them permissions. So if they have a piece of land that they want to metal detect in, they have to get permission, obviously, from the landowner, and they call them permissions. So she's been doing a permission it's Michigan. She's been doing a permission for several years now and found some really interesting things. And lately she's found some really cool stuff. She just found a really odd, it wasn't the same permission, but she just found a bottle buried that had a towel stuffed into it. And nobody has any idea what the heck that could possibly mean. And there was a lot of stuff back in those days, like in the 1800s, the early 1900s, where there were a lot of different sort of ways that they would ward off evil.
I don't want to call it superstitions, but kind of that thing where, put a shoe in the wall to...
Yes, right. I was just thinking about that from Kindred Spirits when they found the shoe in the wall and they had taken it out, I think it was. And so Amy and Adam put it back in the wall because it's supposed to ward off evil spirits.
Don't the spirits go in the shoe or something like that? Or how does that work? I can't remember.
You think they could all fit in there? I'm kidding. But a lot of times creepy stuff like that, they just leave them alone, which I totally agree with. You just leave that stuff alone because you don't want to mess with it.
Yeah.
But she was asking me a few things. Now, this permission that she had been on back in the 1800s, I actually looked this up myself. They had a horrible rash of tornadoes go through that area in a matter of days and killed several people. The land that she detects on, a house was destroyed. I think it said something in the amount of like 25, 26 people were killed. So there's a lot of energy on that land, a lot of, craziness going on that land. So Deej wanted to know, can a large area of land be permeated with negative energy? It sure can.
Yep.
It sure can. It's not always just, and that's a great question because it's not always just a home. It's not always just your backyard. Chances are, if you're in a place where there is activity and it's related to the land, the chance is that the whole area surrounding it is probably going to feel the same way. Now, an exception would be if something specific happened on that piece of land. So, for example, if we did a church maybe 3 years ago now, I think it was, that is a very old church. And it originally had soldiers during the Revolutionary War putting up encampments on that land. So when I walked on that land, I could immediately feel like all of these, like just this whirlwind of activity going on. And that is throughout that whole area because that's where it happened. Now, I do know that it felt like people died on that land to me, but I don't know that it was actually negatively affected by that. But if you go to a place like Gettysburg, for example, with all those thousands of deaths and destruction, it most certainly feels different than where maybe soldiers were just having their encampments, if that makes sense. You've got years upon years of layers of not only the deaths on the Gettysburg soil, but you've got reenactments of the deaths on Gettysburg soil. So yes, it can have more of a negative effect. I do feel in Gettysburg, I always feel a much heavier area, a much heavier feeling in certain areas than I do in other areas of the battlefield. Where certain battles took place, Little Round Top always feels very heavy to me. That's where the Confederates charged up the hill towards the Union soldiers, and there was the big clash. That always feels heavier. Does it feel negative? Yes, in a way. It's residual negativity. It does feel that way. But most certainly, if you have a tornado that killed 26 people and wreaked havoc on a town, you're certainly going to have that activity everywhere that tornado was. It's not going to be just one location. So
that was a great question, and it actually brought something to mind. I kind of had a little bit of an aha moment because you're talking about Gettysburg and you're talking about the war, and I mean, I think about this. Not only were there deaths, but there was a lot of anger and tension over the reason for the war. Yes. And even when you go back to like the Revolutionary War, you know, you want to talk about why some of the colonial cities and stuff like that on the East Coast, same thing, right? They were fighting the British, blah, blah, blah. That energy is there. I mean, honest to God, you can go to Salem, what is now Salem. It wasn't Salem at the time of the witch trials. But what is now Salem? And you can feel that there. You can feel the history that's there. It's amazing to walk those streets. But the aha moment, we've had discussion about like why you're in a house and it's always the white lady coming down the stairs or the shadow figure with the top hat. And we've said, well, why don't we ever see Native Americans and then I'm thinking, well, because we're in a house that they were never a part of. They may have been part of the land. So maybe their energy is felt in that field that nobody goes to, right? Or that wooded area that nobody hangs out in. But maybe if you hung out in there, maybe if you camped there, or maybe if you spent a lot of time, maybe you would have experiences with Native Americans.
Right. Very, very right.
Why didn't I think of that before? Because we always said, well, maybe it's because it's a situation where we don't understand their life, their background. We're not connected in that way, right? We're not connected with their lifestyle, etc. But it's probably because they were in different areas that maybe aren't necessarily always inhabited now.
Yes, I agree. That's very good aha moment. Yeah, I agree with you on that.
But but you're right. Like land, absolutely. Think of Washington Island, all the fighting that went there with Native Americans and the French, and they wanted that island so bad because that was the door to Green Bay or Fort Howard at the time in Wisconsin. That's where all the trading took place. That's where you could go down the Fox River and trade all the way down almost to the Mississippi.
I felt it. You felt it even before we got to the island. Before we even got to the island. I love that story.
You turn that corner, right? And there's an island over here with a beautiful little lighthouse and all that. And you turn that corner and you're going into the harbor there. Yes. And you're like, there's a shiver.
I feel the shift.
Yeah.
Like immediate. And I don't even know that you told me where it would be, but I think we kind of just looked at each other and I went, I feel this big shift right now. This is weird. And the closer you get to that island, it is the entire island.
Yeah.
It is the entire island that has that feeling to it. And it's not all good. It's an uneasy, almost like you got to keep on your guard feeling the entire time that you're on that island.
I also wonder about, so like as humans, you've pretty much lived in New York your entire life, right? Mm-hmm. I've kind of lived in Wisconsin. Yes, I lived in Ohio and I lived in Michigan and I lived in Mississippi and all that kind of stuff. And Mississippi has its own feeling, right? Mm-hmm. And not only from the humans that live there currently, but its history and all that.
Oh, yeah.
You're used to the energy where you live. So if someone like me from Wisconsin comes, I may pick up on stuff that you don't because it's part of your everyday life.
Right. You become almost like one with it.
Yeah, right.
You really do. You become almost like one. That's why I think for me, being sensitive, when there is a major shift anywhere, I can feel it a little bit quicker and a little bit easier because I am so attuned with my everyday life and what I feel normally.
Yeah.
That it does, you can definitely tell large areas of land, and not just negative,
No.
not just negative, heaviness, positivity, all kinds of things can be put into the energy of the land, all kinds of things.
And you learned in the last couple of days that, we think we know everything that happened
right.
in every location. Well, the history of this land is these people came and they were farmers and they were trappers and they did all this stuff. But the truth of the matter is there are just wide areas of land that we know really nothing about.
It's true.
Or we have generalizations of stuff that went on.
Sure.
And you were in a situation where, man, nobody had thought about this stuff. There was literally history that happened that even the people who run the town or the city had no idea. It's
no
like,
idea.
What?
How is it even possible? Right. And then you slowly put the pieces together. It was funny because the land that I was on, I definitely felt like at one point it had to have been separated into tracts of land because I think it was one big area. It almost felt like farmland to me. Like I could almost see like the farm implements and stuff like that. But it had a little bit of a Native American presence on it. And then we find out all this other stuff that just adds to that mystery. Again, layer upon layer upon layer, spread throughout the whole area. Large amounts of land can give you those kinds of feelings.
Mm-hmm.
Does it have to control everything you do?
No.
Positive, negative, heavy. It doesn't have to. It's just more understanding it, that most of that stuff is residual. It's not intelligent, and that's just who you are and where you are at that point in time. And, we all have to learn to adjust and live with that kind of stuff and not be afraid of it because it is part of our history. I think we should accept it, understand it, and be at peace with it. There's a lot. There's days you may be walking through the woods and just all of a sudden feel little off or something's going on. I told them on Friday night, this house that we went to, I said, everybody has the ability to feel energy.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes, and people with quote unquote abilities, more sensitive people obviously feel it deeper and stronger and may be able to make better sense of it. But everybody has the ability to feel energy. They just don't listen to themselves.
Right.
They are aware of themselves and what they're feeling all the time. Nobody is, but I think people who are more open to the possibility also have a better chance of being able to feel those things as well.
And also
listen
listen to yourself and understand when you're just feeling creeped out because you watched a spooky movie and you had to go lock the back door. There's a difference between that and going, okay, I'm feeling kind of creepy right now.
Yeah. Is there something going on?
Right.
That used to happen to me all the time on the empath side because I would be like, oh, Dave, let's go to this new restaurant or let's go to this store. And I'm so excited. And we get in the car and we get there and I'd be like, why don't we do something else? And I didn't understand it. I didn't know what was going on. But as soon as I got there, it just felt off to me and I just didn't feel comfortable there. Has that happened to anyone? Because that you don't have to be a strong empath to feel those things. We just sometimes aren't aware of a lot of that stuff and how it can affect us and that we even can pick up on it.
Right.
We just think we're silly or we're imagining things but maybe you're not so much imagining.
Right.
So I just thought that was a great question. And the other one that I wanted to talk about was, can a person who was a child, who was sensitive as a child, go through almost like a dormant period and then kind of realize their sensitivities at a later age? And I said, without a shadow of a doubt. Now, this is just from my own thoughts and my experience, but I believe that we do have spirit guides. And I do believe that we are given these tools, people who are sensitive, when the time is right for us, when it makes sense to us. So now when we're children, we're a little closer to the other side. We all know this. Children sometimes have quote unquote imaginary friends that maybe aren't quite really imaginary friends. They see things, they know things because they aren't aware of the fact that a lot of people poo-poo this stuff. And so it's real to them. And then maybe they get older and they kind of don't feel comfortable and they deny it, or maybe spirit says at this point in your life, maybe it would be detrimental to you to have this knowledge and have this going on in your life, and they'll pull it back a little bit. And then maybe as you get older and you get more settled, then maybe you're given your abilities back because you can help other people. You know, there's so many different scenarios to it, but I truly believe that that's a possibility. And I do believe that those watching over us can help sort of guide us in that way as we go through the different stages of our lives.
And I also think, and I'll just add to that, I don't think it necessarily has to just be sensitive as a child and then it goes away and then it comes back. I think as an adult, you can also be sensitive and have experiences and then be closed off for a while.
Yes.
I feel like for me, right now in my life, I'm very closed off.
Yeah,
I'm not experiencing anything. I have no interest in it right now. And yet, talk to me 2 years ago, and I had never been more open to it. So, I think we all go through stages.
I agree. And I think that if it's not the right time for you to have that, if it can be detrimental to you to have that, then I think that is a reason why it may calm down. It may step back a little bit. I had periods in my life where I know things were happening, but I wasn't aware of them. I didn't know. I can look back now. But ever since I started to really accept and notice it more, and I do think it was for a reason. I do think I was shown this for a reason because I'm at a point in my life where I need to start understanding these things. I need to start moving forward with these things. I need to help people more with these things. That once I accepted it and kind of gave into it, I've now leveled up so much. But I've also been able to help people. You know, to me, just showing someone that they don't have to be afraid of something, that they can understand it, to me is really helping someone. And so maybe that's what my purpose has been in the past, 10 years, is to help people, to be able to learn and understand it enough to be able to help others to learn and understand it, Now, I feel like I'm always going to be this way at this point in my life. Now I'm in almost my mid 50s.
You wish.
Wishful thinking. But I think that's my gift, and that's what I've been given. And so I'm okay with that. Sometimes it can be a little unsettling because I don't understand the things that, sometimes I will know things or pick up on things that are make me a little nervous, but I just trust in the process. I just have to trust in the process. But I certainly think that you're given or help to close off things when it's right for you. Either way, when it's right for you to be open, when it's right for you to be more closed off, I think there's not as much coincidence as we think to this kind of stuff. So I thought that was a great question too, because I think that happens a lot. And I think a lot of people who are sensitive, who do have abilities, can go back through their life and recall times when maybe they were a little bit more closed off and it didn't affect them as much. And maybe they were less closed off and it did affect them more, So I just thought those were great questions. So thank you, Deej, for that. And we also have something, not next week, because next week we're going to be off. I'll be traveling. I might do something with Dave, though, just as a kind of a bonus episode while we're in Saranac Lake, and post that, though, late on Sunday. But anyways, the week after, our dear friend Chris, who messages with me a lot, who's a big listener to the show, has sent me a question or two that I would love to go over. Great questions always from Chris. So we'll do that in a couple weeks.
All right. Sounds good to me.
All right. So we will not see everybody next week, but we should be back the week after.
All right. Sounds good. So season 13 will continue in a couple of weeks. You might get that bonus content from Sandy and Dave. It's just going to be Dave going, poor me, poor me, poor me. And Sandy will be in the background eating a whole donut.
Another whole donut.
Thinking that she's still in her 40s.
I'm getting gourmet popcorn next weekend. Oh, and I'm going down the mountain coaster in Lake Placid. I already bought my ticket.
Okay. And you're going to get video of that and you're going to post that.
I'm going to try. I don't know if they'll let me take my camera, but I was hoping to, because you got to kind of maneuver it to slow yourself and make yourself faster. But I'm going to try.
Oh, this is not going to turn out well. This will be the last episode of the Sandy and Toddcast because Sandy's not going to be able to maneuver and slow herself down and lean in.
Well, I do have a GoPro. I just got to see if I still have the strength to even go around my arm. I don't know. I got to see if I can try and rig a way that I can have both hands free and still have my phone on me. They're going to think I'm insane when I get there. I did zip line down a mountain in Lake George, New York in 2017, which was amazing. So I'm looking forward to this. This goes right along. It's in Lake Placid. It goes right along the Lake Placid 1980 Olympics bobsled track. So you literally are going right along the track. It's really cool. It's like 1.5 miles long. I'm very excited.
This will be good.
It was $55, but I was like, you know what? When am I ever going to do this again? I'm just going to do it.
So I'll just throw this out there. We'll need a new co-host in a couple of weeks.
Send in your applications to Todd.
All right. Until you do hear from us again, we hope you stay well and bye.